And a good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Issues and Attitudes. My name is Jeff Owens, Interim General Manager at WEIU. My co-host, Annalisa Haynes.
How's it going, everyone?
Good. And making another appearance is Illinois State Senator Dale Ryder.
Good day, Mr. Owens. How are you?
We're going to talk Illinois politics. We're going to talk a lot about Dale Ryder. Well, we have to. All right,
Well, we don't have to.
It's funny is I always ask you to break news, and then you break news, but it's not on the radio. So earlier this year, you announced that you're not going to run for re-election in 2020, so you'll be done in about 14 months.
That's right. Not that we're counting, but no. But yeah, on May 31st, the last scheduled day of the spring legislative session, I issued my statement. I didn't want to do it before we got out because I didn't want to try to do the work I do over there for the people I represent and spend all my time answering questions about that issue. But anyway, yes.
I guess what led you to say, you've been doing it since 2003 in the Senate, and prior to that as a rep. What kind of led you to that decision? What was going through the mind that just said, I've had enough?
After a while, this job, particularly I would say the political part of this job, it can wear on you. And I have always been richly blessed in that the two occupations that I have primarily held in my adult life is I was a prosecutor for a little over 5 years, and then I've done this work. Now, I've practiced law on and off throughout my tenure in the General Assembly, but I've loved those jobs. And they have been both professionally and personally rewarding for me. But in the last couple of years, I could kind of feel that the political side, the grind of the politics was beginning to wear me down, and you feel a little bit of cynicism or a little bit of impatience that you maybe didn't have before, and I didn't want to walk any further down that road, so it was time for me to leave.
When you, I know it's not your maybe not your last appearance, but assuming depending on scheduling stuff, when you look back on your time in Springfield, can you list a couple of accomplishments maybe that you're most proud about that you've had your hand on?
I would say I'm going to answer one way specifically and one way more general. Specifically, years ago I carried legislation to add certain genetic defects to the newborn screening panel in Illinois. So when a baby is born in Illinois, they take a drop of blood from his or her toe. They screen that for diseases and genetic defects. I've been part of a number of those actually since 1999, which it's something that is both big and you see the results immediately, which is rare, quite frankly, in policy making.
Yeah.
Also, and more generally speaking, I've been part of trying to prevent what I think were more harmful policies come in Illinois, particularly in terms of borrowing and issues like that. Sometimes one thing I learned in politics and governance is sometimes keeping something from happening or keeping something from being as worse as it could have been is a victory. And that's not always easy in your head to rack up you're not exactly breaking the tape at the finish line, okay? But those are victories sometimes, and particularly if you're in the political minority, those are the victories.
So, anything on your mind over there?
No, I was just gonna say, you mentioned that they might not be like groundbreaking victories, but they're still victories to you. Right. So is that something that you think the constituents were able to recognize? Was that part rewarding to you?
Yeah. There have been several times after the session was over that one of the things that you come back and talk about is the fact that you were able to put all your Republicans together and you're able to get a handful of Democrats to keep the rest of the majority from borrowing even billions in dollars more and putting this state and the next generation of taxpayers further into debt. So yeah, you come back and talk to about it. And I've always been very fortunate. My constituents are good listeners and they pay attention. And so I probably received more credit for doing things that are keeping other things from happening than I would suspect most of my colleagues. But I give the credit for that to my constituents.
If you talk about accomplishments, is there anything you regret? Anything you didn't get done that you wish, man, if I could wave that magic wand, I wish I would have got done?
Oh yeah, balanced budget, get rid of, fix the pensions. I mean, sure, there's a laundry list of those. And I think that was part of my thought process in deciding whether or not to run again or not, is accepting the fact that there's always going to be a list of unchecked boxes, right?
Yeah.
There's always going to be more to do, and having the humility to recognize that I am one member of 177 members in the General Assembly, and that there were lots and lots of people who came before me, and there are going to be lots and lots of people who come after me, and some of them are going to be better than I was at this job, and some are going to be worse than that job, and I'm just a small piece of the history of the General Assembly. And you have to kind of take on that humility. Then you recognize, you know what, someone's coming after me. That list will still be there, and you hope that they tackle it.
So you mentioned, taking on that humility. Is that something that when you first entered into this position, or even when you were a representative, was that something that you had? Because I feel like if I was a politician, I have these grand dreams and these big dreams about making. Does that make sense? Everyone does,
absolutely,
I feel like.
absolutely.
So was that difficult to look? I do make a difference, but it's not as big as. As I dreamt it would be, or something like that.
Absolutely. When I first joined the House of Representatives, I was 31 years old, and I had this schedule, okay? So I'm going to serve in this office for so long, and then after then I'm going to go to this office, and then I'm going to go to this office, and when I walk away, I'm going to be in a really, really high place in political office. Didn't quite work out that way. And what you learn pretty quickly, if you're paying attention, and if you are blessed to have people around you who are honest with you, you learn that, okay, it doesn't just move like that. It's not a conveyor belt. It doesn't move that way. And what I've really noticed in the last 10 years is how many people who come into Springfield with that I'm going to change the world attitude. And it's interesting to watch how quickly they figure out that they are a relatively small fish in a pretty large pond, particularly when they first get there. And then the question is, how do you deal with that? So do you fight against that? Do you get angry about that? Or do you recognize that, and then do you do what you can to develop relationships and operate within the sphere of influence that you're able to get? And the effective legislators do the latter.
And how long do you think until you learned that part? Was it?
I'll tell you.
That's a tough. That's something.
Right.
That's an introspective thing to come up with.
Right, and I would say that it took for me. I served in the House for 5 years, and because my first election was so combative, and I was
to get in the rep
scared
or the Senate?
to do my first election for the House. I would say it took several. I would say it took my most, if not all, my time in the House, and then the first few years in the Senate before I got comfortable with the notion that, okay, this is who I am, and this is where I can make a difference. And yeah, I would say it probably maybe took a decade before I really figured that out. Yeah.
We're talking to Illinois State Senator Dale Ryder today. I guess since you still have 14 months left, and are there things you would love to get done before you get out of there? Is there a couple things that you're working on right now that you can tell us about?
I don't have what you would characterize necessarily as specific legislative projects. There are different schools of thought in Springfield, and different legislators grab onto those depending, I think, on their personalities and their experience. I've never been a legislator who measured my success by the number of bills that I personally sponsored or co-sponsored.
Okay.
And what I learned is that you have a certain amount of time in every day of your legislative session, and your effectiveness depends in part on how you choose to utilize that time. I see legislators who carry 30 or 40 different pieces of legislation in spring session. I've never tried that. I don't know how you could possibly do that. But the more time you're spending running to committee hearings and doing this and negotiating that, whatever, then you don't have time to talk about the bigger issues. And I have always chosen to invest the balance of my time in the committee hearings and the meetings, because a lot of decisions are made in meetings and not in a committee and not on the House or Senate floor. being part of those bigger issues and trying to move those in the direction that I believed was best for my constituents and for the state as a whole. And that's I'm going to continue to serve out my term doing the same thing.
Everybody's asked me this, and you told me before, but plans for, after.
I'm actually, I spent a lot of money on a legal education and passing the bar, so I thought I'd give it a spin and see how it works out. So I'm gonna practice law. I'm looking forward to. One thing I would say in this job that I've gotten used to is while I work a lot of hours, with the exception of spring session, because legislative session I don't set those hours. I'm back here in the district. I kind of set my own hours.
Yeah.
And I've gotten used to that, quite frankly. So I've had the opportunity to go to practice law for other people, and we're not going to do that. I'm just going to do it on my own. I think I like that, and I think there's a niche to fill in this market, and that's what we're going to do.
And you can set your own hours if you
I can set my own hours. That's exactly right.
Class of 84 people are smart.
Yeah,
Lisa,
okay.
you didn't know that?
Exactly right.
No comment on that, I
What
guess.
else is going on in Springfield right now that I know the Fair Maps petition's out there still, right? So talk about that if you can, and your thoughts.
To me, changing the process by which we redraw the legislative boundaries every 10 years is the most important reform that we can take on. It is the reform that gives spark to all the other positive reforms, because once you have a process by which, rather than having 10% of the legislative districts politically competitive in every election cycle, 60% of them are, I think that more legislators are going to be, and certainly going to feel, more accountable for what they're doing. It gives the people more influence if fewer legislators are basically carefully and comfortably ensconced in a safe district. Safe districts, I think, build the political divide in part in what we're seeing right now. So that to me is the most important thing. The governor says he's for it. Now, thus far, the governor has only said he's for it. He hasn't actually done anything to show us that he's actually for it. There is a redistricting process piece of legislation sitting in the Senate, actually sponsored by a Senate Democrat. It has, of the 59 senators, I think it's almost got 40 co-sponsors. That thing needs to move. It's the right thing to do. Do I expect the current Democratic leaders to voluntarily give up their ability to draw the map? Not unless they are pressured by the voters to do so.
Okay. Well, speaking of political divide, I guess we'll move to Washington. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, at least I have to, you know that. I got the look from there. President Trump, the impeachment hearings, just your thought right now, what's going on in Washington? D.C., I should say.
Now, the president has been... He has upset the apple cart, the conventional apple cart over in Washington. And he's done that by doing what I would say are some very positive things. He's also done that in some ways that are not positive at all. People like me, and maybe I'm an old school Republican, and that's my problem, but the president does not fully embody someone who I think of as being president of the United States. All right, I was a huge George H.W. Bush fan, and to me, he fit the positive stereotype of a president of the United States. He was careful in his words. He was experienced in a large array of fields, and it was an unavoidable feeling that he's a good person. I'm not sure the current president gives you all those feelings, quite frankly. I know the Republicans right now are shutting off the radio, sorry. But as far as the impeachment hearings go, the Constitution says high crimes and misdemeanors. Still waiting for the list of high crimes and misdemeanors. Interestingly, one of the president's most vocal proponents in this process is Alan Dershowitz, not exactly known as a conservative Republican, who's saying that the impeachment process in this regard is being completely politicized, and there's no evidence of the wrongdoing that the Constitution actually envisions. Now, maybe that's unveiled today at a hearing or tomorrow or whatever. But thus far, I don't think we see that. I don't think we see that yet.
Yeah, Wednesday's supposedly the big day, but they've been saying.
Then that'll be it. I mean, this is a process, and you're either going to come up with the evidence or you're not going to come up with the evidence. What I hope the Democratic majority in the House does not do is vote for articles of impeachment when, in fact, there's nothing about high crimes and misdemeanors that's been uncovered by the evidence.
Good answer. Question? Annalisa?
I'm still thinking about picking a senator's brain because now, if you think about it,
it's not. Yeah.
But you're able to. I just think this is fascinating. You're able to look back on all the years that you've been in the House and on the Senate floor, and you're able to see, okay, what can I take away from this? What can I tell people who are 31 years old and are going in there or younger, you know, who want to go and run. I just think that's fascinating because you have something that a lot of people don't have right now, and you have that insight and you could share that. So
what would you say to young politicians?
That's not really yeah.
Well, listen more than you talk. Which was, I want to be clear, I'm not saying, wow, that's the path to success because that's what I did. I did not do that very well. And it took me, I mean, we talked about that maturation process for me and how long that took. And part of that was the difference between not talking and listening. And politicians are, as bad, you know, guys get a bad rap for this. They don't get a bad rap for it. They get an accurate rap for that. The guys are not good listeners. I mean, that's societally, and that's quite frankly true. Politicians are the next cut, worse above that. And it's because we're always thinking about the next thing we're going to say, as opposed to waiting until the person who's on the other side has finished what they're saying and then thinking, okay, now how do I engage with them on that? You know, it's the easiest thing in the world in terms of public speaking to say things that ensure that only the people who already agree with you will agree with you. That's easy. That's easy. And both. I mean, whether it's slinging red meat to the Republicans on the far right or the same thing to the Democrats on the far left. That's the easy thing to do. The question is, how do you talk with someone and engage with someone who's not quite there with you on whatever it is you think is important enough to be spending that kind of time with them, and just help them see something a little bit different.
And that's kind of what's going on in the country right now anyway, right? Because everybody's kind of got their own little cabins they're living in, and they don't want to go visit the other cabin.
Exactly. I've seen some video clips of the hearings thus far, and both sides are largely speaking to their camps. And so you've got this group in the middle who's like, okay, whatever. I mean, it's a show, and it does give the appearance of a show sometimes. But there's no question, and there's a lot that goes into that, including the way we communicate with each other has changed radically in the last 20 years or so, and the mediums by which political discourse occurs is completely different than it was even when I got in office. Oh. And those changes are they're advantageous because it allows for the transmission or exchange of more information a lot more quickly. The downside of that is that it also enables people to react much more quickly and in a non-personal way that shuts other people down. Mm-hmm. And that's the downside of that. But that's up to us. That's up to us and how we handle that.
That's great. I'm glad you said that.
Oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I'm glad you said that. I think that's wise of you to say, because it is a huge problem. Everyone's just so starkly divided. It's sad.
Well, so. I know two people have announced that they're going to run for your seat in the 55th district.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that much about them. Can you tell us a little bit about the two candidates?
Darren Bailey is a current Republican state representative. He's from Xenia, which is down a little bit south of here. He is a farmer by trade and came to office by defeating former Representative David Rice in a Republican primary in 2018. His opponent is an attorney from Olney in Richland County named Jeff Fleming, who's been a long-time attorney down there. So those are the two people.
And you do not want to endorse either of them at this point, right?
No, I mean I haven't endorsed
Even thought
anyone
that
at this
part.
point. So I just first of all, speaking of humility, it's remarkable the number of people who have a title who think that by endorsing someone that they are swaying the masses. I mean, my constituents have always made it clear to me that while they're interested in they may be interested in what I think on a certain issue, they're pretty much going to make up their own minds from day to day. Good for them, okay? And I think a lot more people are like that. I just think that sometimes politicians that's right, they're not realizing that, yeah.
But on that same pace, let's say whoever wins and they ask you for advice, just a little bit of advice. Is something you've already said today, or would there be other advice for?
Oh, whatever, yeah, sure. In fact, and I've talked to both Darren and Jeff. I mean, when they were thinking about announcing and since they've announced, because look, I want them to be the best candidates that they can be. I want them to be the most responsive that they can be. I mean, the better they are whoever wins, when they walk in the door, better off my constituents are going to be. Better off I'm going to be, because I'm a constituent.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I guess the big question, how long did it take you to realize that you're not going to make everyone happy?
Oh, that lesson did not take long to soak in. My first campaign in 1998, my opponent and I, yes.
Yeah. This was legendary.
Good memory. My opponent and I set the record for the most money ever spent in an Illinois House of Representatives campaign up to that point in history.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yes.
And again, I was
Brown
born in
Hodge.
'97,
Yes.
so I
From
wouldn't
Paris,
have
right? Am I
known
right?
that.
Correct.
Yeah.
Wow, nice.
There's some things I have a good memory of.
Yes,
That's about it.
yeah. I mean, and she was a very, very aggressive, very hardworking candidate. And she had run before. She had run against my predecessor in 1992 and given him the closest run that he had ever had in his time in office. I'm this 31-year-old, jumps into the political, never been involved in politics before, gets in, and of course I'd been a prosecutor before that. Prosecutors typically the good guys, right, wearing the White House, right? And I'll never forget the first time I got hit in the newspaper, criticized for a vote I took. I was just like, oh, you're kidding me. Someone's saying something bad about me? Oh my God. Yeah, and I had to like shake that off, and I was like, okay, this is the way it's going to be. And so I learned that lesson pretty quickly, that people disagree with you or voice disagreement with you because they honestly disagree with you. And there's some people who voice disagreement with you because they think it's good politics for them. Right, exactly.
They just don't
exactly.
like you.
You know what? And after a while, you figure out which is which, and then because one you can't care about, and the other one you have to care about, right? And yeah, I learned that lesson pretty quickly. I was thrown in the deep end.
How is, when we talk about the current economic situation in Springfield and the state of Illinois, can you assess it right now? I mean, you hear all this stuff about people leaving Illinois, we're taxed to death. I mean, your thoughts?
I do not believe we are trending in a positive direction right now. The major issue, policy issue, that voters are going to get the opportunity, I don't want to say have to decide, they get the opportunity to decide, and this is one of the richness of our systems, is the constitutional change that the governor and the Democratic majority have put on the table for next year that would strip out the flat tax mandate from, not just the flat tax mandate, from the Illinois Constitution. It would also strip out a provision in the Constitution that prohibits state government from assessing more than one income tax on you at any one time, which is something that people aren't talking about, but they need to talk about unless they want to be taxed for different streams of income, which cumulatively would mean you pay at a much higher rate than what's advertised on the board. The governor says it'll raise an extra $3.4 billion. I mean, people have to decide, do they think the economy should have $3.4 billion more whisked away from here and sent to Springfield? And we're going to have that debate, but that's not what's troubling. What's troubling is going on right now in Springfield and Chicago, which is making it increasingly clear that the only entity that is actually capable of cleaning up Springfield is the United States Attorney's Office out of the Northern District of Illinois and the associated federal law enforcement entities, most notably the FBI. I mean, you're seeing there are in the Senate, we have one Democratic member who's under a Secretary of State Securities investigation. You have another one who's been wearing an FBI wire since 2016 for things that he got in trouble for. I mean, that's why he was wearing a wire, is to get out of trouble. You have another one whose Capitol office, district office, and home have been raided, and he hasn't been seen since then. And the conventional wisdom is he's spending a lot of time at the federal building in Chicago talking to the FBI. Then you have another one who's under the cloud of a 41-count indictment. That's 10% of the Senate Democrat caucus. The Senate President, John Cullerton, announced his retirement on Thursday. Thursday. I mean, we can speculate as to whether or not these issues have anything to do with that. I'm not suggesting the Senate President is engaged in wrongdoing. I am suggesting that the more that the federal government wades into these issues, the more they are discovering that everything is connected right below the surface, and I think that that's going to continue. And people ask me, well, do you think Republicans are going to get in trouble? I don't know, but if there are Republicans who have done things that are wrong, they should get in trouble. Because actually, and one of the benefits of that would be that no one's going to be able to point and say, well, it's just you. You're the only problem. So we'll see.
There you go. And honestly, it doesn't matter if the Republicans or Democrats in some ways, right? If you've done something wrong, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't at all.
You're an Illinois citizen.
Because someone who does something like that, I mean, the Representative Luis Arroyo, who is a Democratic representative from Chicago, who attempted to bribe the aforementioned state senator who was wearing the wire, and tried to pay the state senator to carry a piece of gambling legislation. I mean, clearly, Representative Arroyo believed that the law did not matter, that he was going to do what he was going to do, and the law doesn't matter. And the question for all of us needs to be, do you think it's a good idea to have people like that setting policy in the state of Illinois? And everyone would say, well, no. Well, okay, but if they can't fix it, then someone else has got to fix it.
Got a couple minutes left with Dale Ryder. At least anything on your mind?
Welcome to 70 plus years of Illinois, I guess.
Right. Oh, there's no question. There is a long and not so cherished tradition of this. Absolutely. And we will find out at the end of this, whenever that comes, whether or not this is the worst it's ever been. But if I was a betting guy, I would say it will be.
What do you think you'll miss the most about going to Springfield?
About going to Springfield?
Just being there. I mean,
the people I work with. I work with wonderful people over there. I'm sitting here talking about the FBI and the U.S. Attorney's Office, but the simple fact is that's a relatively small pocket, powerful, but small pocket. The people that I work with, the overwhelming majority of the people with whom I associate on a daily basis in Springfield are public servants in the finest meaning of the word. They are doing their best to make things as good as possible for the people who are paying for this state government. I will absolutely miss those people.
Will you ever run for office again in anything?
You know, Jim Edgar taught me a long time ago, never say never. But I have been richly blessed that when I leave office, I will have spent 23 years in public office, getting to do something that not many people get to do.
Was it worth it?
Oh gosh, yes. Every day of it, whether I realized it during that day or not.
Yeah.
And sometimes I didn't. Lots of times I didn't. But it was absolutely worth it. Absolutely.
All right, we are out of time. Plenty more questions to go, but we have to get out of here. Dale Ryder, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you guys both for having me. Enjoyed it.
Have a great Thanksgiving week. Illinois State Senator Dale Ryder. This is WEIU.